Good day to all that's there watching here. I'm John K. Allen, host of the Oracles of God, but guest hosting the Chocolate Box. And today we have an extraordinary guest, a woman of much character. Her name is Lita Calvert, and she's going to be here talking with us on a very great topic. And in this conversation that we're going to have today, we're going to cover a lot of varieties, and we're just going to put it out there. We're going to talk about it, and we're just going to just make things just the way they are, the way you see them every day. But before we get into that conversation, let me introduce you to Lita Calvert and let her introduce you to her show, and as her being our guest, to tell us a little bit about her. Lita?
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lita Calvert, and I will be hosting a future show called Come Let Us Reason Together. And I also did a special which will be airing July 31st called Who's Schooling Who? So please stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Lita. We appreciate that. Now we're going to go into our topic, and we're going to call this topic, Let's Put It Out There. And this topic may be controversial, which it will be, because we want to put it out there, because we're going to deal with life as we live it and as we face it each and every day. Now, Lita, earlier today we were talking, you and I, and in a conversation you said something that brought my attention to the outcome of the story that you started. You was telling me about a young lady that had a partner, and her partner, between the two of them, had a child, and the child had a father, and then you went into the whole situation. It was quite deep. I want you to reiterate what you told me earlier so that I can get the full picture of what took place, please.
Okay. And we're talking about the LGBT community, and it was in reference to a same-gender loving couple. It was two ladies. One was my coworker, and her wife had a son. And we were having a discussion in the job, in the workplace, and she brought up how her son wanted to see his father, but because they felt he was a deadbeat, they didn't want him to see his father. Well, the son insisted and asked for his mother to leave her partner at home so he could go talk to his mother and convince her to see his father.
Oh my God. Now, you know, we have a lot of laws and regulations that are going on in our society today, and we understand that we have the letter issue, the LGBT and so on, and there's now even maybe a possible S at the end of it for the singles. And I want you to elaborate a little bit on that, how you see with our laws and the rules and regulations that are making things to set up for this group of people versus the straight people. How does that affect you, or how does that affect our society?
Well, my concern is about how it's affecting the children that are not able to, are not mature enough to make those type of decisions for themselves. First off, let me say I'm not here to judge you if you're in the LGBTQ community or the straight community, because at the end of the day, when it comes to God, He's the judge, number one, and number two, all souls are His. So this is not an attack on the alphabet at all, but I would like for you to add the S in the alphabet for straight. Just like you have your perspective about how you want to live, we also have ours too. And we can agree to disagree. Honestly, whether you're straight or you gay, in God's eyes I'm talking, sin is sin. So I don't have a hell to put you in. And you're still a human being at the end of the day, such as we are.
So then, when you make that statement and what you've just said, how do you compare, or how is it that the rules and the regulations and the laws that have been put forth for the LGBTQ society and then the straight people, how do the laws conflict with the straight people that they're making for that particular community?
Well, I can put it like this. You have divine laws that cannot be altered. And then you have man's laws that all you have to do is have a unanimous vote and it can change from day to day. But there are some divine laws that cannot be changed. Yes, there's the argument that those in the LGBTQ are born that way. That's not for me to decide. But at the same time, when you look at what's happening to the children, their identity is being attacked now. You have some parents that are allowing their children to determine whether or not they want to identify as a boy or a girl. But are they really mature enough? There's no such thing as you have two mothers raising a boy or girl. You have two fathers raising a boy or a girl. Each child is made up of the masculine and feminine hormones. Okay? So when you're being raised by two women or two men, part of that child's identity is lost. And then how do you feel like that would affect them growing up? Because they do have a mother and a father at the end of the day, even though one may be absent.
Very good point. Now, it's good that you should bring that up. You know, I was down in Charleston, South Carolina, with my grandson to go visit my daughter and her husband. And I noticed while I was there, down in Charleston, there was a commercial that came on, and it was a commercial dealing with eHarmony. And the young man had his arms spread out, and there was another man on a scooter that was standing behind the man that had his arms spread out. They were pretty much in love with each other. They cared for each other, and they was on the skateboard going down. And my grandson, he just looked up and said, Papa, why are those two men on the skateboard? And I just looked at him and I said, let me get back with you. Now, he's 6 years old. And I had to stop and just think about how am I to talk to him about that and to express or to explain for him seeing that, because he's been seeing his mother and father all the time. So now it's this advertisement that comes on. What would you say? Or maybe you could tell me, how should I have handled talking to my grandson and when the time comes in that particular subject matter?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you brought up the commercial about eHarmony. What has really angered me is I'm tired of seeing commercials that are emasculating our black men. Every day, all day long, most of the commercials are about our black men, effeminate gay men. And they very rarely show straight men. And so I have an issue with that. And when it comes to your children, and please know, those of you in the alphabet community, we're not homophobic, we're not transgender phobic, but we're raising our kids a certain way just like you want to raise your children. So you have a right to choose how you want to raise your kid, but don't knock us for instilling in our children the beliefs that we instill in them in order for them to grow and have a healthy mind when it comes to their sexual identity.
Well, what do you say to it that Congress and those, the Democratic side, and you know, the Republicans are much against this, but the Democratic side are making the laws and the rules to make a pathway for that community? I mean, what do you say to that? They've got the law behind them.
And that's fine. They can have the law behind them, but we have the divine law as well. And so I would say, at the end of the day, there's nothing new under the sun. And parents, you have to make sure you teach your kids at home, because now they're putting this information into the schools. A little child knows nothing about transgenderism, but yet they're trying to put it in the elementary books. And so, parent, it behooves you to teach your kids at home the truth.
Well, you know, I can see how another woman can have a child without the man, the way they do the childbirth reproduction system now, and I see that, and they have a child within the partners. But now, how do you explain that to two men that are raising a child, where we know that it takes the man's semen, the man's body, to make provisions for this woman to become pregnated? So now, when you look at two men, how do we explain to the child there are two men here, and how did this happen when we know that it's a man and a woman that God created to make this happen? How do we explain that to them?
I would say, depending on the age of the child, don't even try to explain that part to them, but you bring it back to the man and the woman. Don't focus on that, because no matter what you say, it's not going to make sense.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying there with the way you would bring it to them, especially at an early age. And when they get older, naturally they'll learn more, and then they'll be more receptive to what you can tell them at that time. But with the laws and the rules that are coming, and if you didn't know this, which I'm sure you do, there are laws that straight out the box, they can adopt the child into a home and start bringing them up at that time. Are you aware of that?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Look, we're having a good time. We're going to take a break just for a moment, and we're going to take a pause for the calls here on the Chocolate Box, because we're having a good time. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
When I'm in Charlotte, I tune into the Chocolate Box. We back, revved up. Let's go.
All right, we're back. I'm John K. Allen, host of Oracles of God, but today hosting the Chocolate Box Presents. Now, before we continue on, once again, I want to reintroduce our guest, Lita Calvert. And Lita, just go ahead and introduce yourself one more time.
My name is Lita Calvert, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I will be hosting an up-and-coming show called Come and Let Us Reason Together. So please stay tuned.
Great, great. Now, today we have a very controversial subject, and we're calling this today, Let's Put It Out There. And in this conversation that we're having, we're talking about the alphabet society dealing with LGBTQ and so on and so forth. And the question that I asked before we went on break was, with two men marrying and being together, and they're with an adoption of a child, how do you see that? Two men coming together, two partners, and then they adopt a son or a daughter into their relationship.
I'm very concerned about it because, again, like I said, every child, every one of us born into this world came into this world with a mother and a father. And so when you're raising a child with two same sexes, the other gender is being excluded, and that will affect the child. Now, on the flip side of that, I read a story one day where it was like 6 siblings were in a very abusive family. They were being abused, but there was 2 gay gentlemen that ended up adopting them. And so I was really torn. Do you allow them to go with this same gender-loving couple who's going to give them love, had property, could give them the best things money could buy? Or do you keep them in the system?
Oh, wow.
And so that was challenging for me to answer.
You know, and it's great that you would bring that up, because a man has his own, the male gender has his own thought process logically, the way he thinks. And then the female has her own gender and her logical way, or her way of thinking, which she normally thinks from her heart and love. So now you've got the two that come together to make that person, I would say, complete in the way that God would have intended, versus 2 genders that come together that are the same. And I would think that would be a conflict. Would you?
It's definitely a conflict, but in the same gender-loving person's eyes, they feel like it's totally normal. And so that's out of my control.
Right.
And so, again, I go back to how is it affecting the children? And then you will have, I've had some of those in that community say, well, what about the parents that, the heterosexual parents that are not doing a good job of raising their kids? What about them? And they make a valid point, because you have some straight parents that don't need to be parents either.
You know, I want to also go to say that, because you haven't mentioned this, but I do know from talking to you and becoming a friend of yours, that Miss Calvert has an extensive knowledge of children. Not only she has her child, but she's come from Atlanta at one point. She's been a school teacher. She's been a bus driver. She is a parent, and she has had extensive visits in the school system to learn the conduct and the thought process of the children versus the administration. And that's one thing that we would like to talk about sometime down the road. But just to listen to her speak about the way she sees the youth and the way she sees the youth in an alphabetical society is very, very capturing, the way she expounds on it. Tell us a little bit more about that, as far as the way you see the children and then the parenting mixed in together.
Okay, well, some of my experiences when I was driving the school bus in Atlanta, and I'm talking elementary kids, and this was back in 2007 and 8. There were children, kindergarten and first grade, saying, she's gay, she's a lesbian. Even when I would go to the Boys and Girls Club, I was hearing that same thing coming from little children.
To each other.
To each other in elementary school. And so this was years ago, so fast forward now, it's on a whole new level. Our children, their identity is at stake. And if we as parents don't tell our children who they are and who they are not, the world will continue to shape our children.
Now, when you experienced this as you were school bus driving and also stepped in to be a teacher's aide as well as a teacher to substitute, were there any conflicts between you and any of the parents from that school system by way of what you seen with the child and what you knew about the parent once you saw the two or dealt with one or the other?
There were never really conflicts with the parents. In any student that I came in contact with, my mission is to speak to their greatness. So I would always try to find a way to drop knowledge to them, regardless of what age they were, to speak into their lives and tell them who they are. Though there were those that were gay in middle school and high school, and they were proud of it. And I still had to respect them, regardless, even though I didn't agree with it. And if I may say to the LGBT community, we're asking you, those of us in the straight community, don't assume that we're homophobic, transgender phobic because we disagree with the lifestyle. When you are an adult, you get to choose who you want to be and what you want to be.
The choice.
It's a choice. But we're asking that you please respect our choice as far as being straight and how we believe we are to raise our kids.
And you know, this is not just a situation that's in Atlanta or in Charlotte, or this is a national thing, because this is everywhere. And it's the point of handling it correctly. Now, personally, my grandson, I'll have to sit back and do a little thinking, because yes, he has a mother and father, but he did ask his grandfather, why am I looking at that? What does that mean? And that is something that you have to fight in between, trying to show your children the correct way that you know that life should be versus what the society is trying to bring in front of us. And I notice now on the television, there is not only in the eHarmony commercials, but even in the commercials where they have two men at home and they have a child there and they're raising them. It's a commercial, but it's set up for you to see that that looks normal. They're trying to make this normal. What do you say to that?
No, they're not trying to make it normal. It has become the norm, and not just in the commercials. Even your TV programs now, you see it in the television programs. And so when it comes to your children, it's important for you to give them an answer. And if you don't have the answer, let them know, son or daughter, let me think about it, and we'll talk about it. But you must give them an answer and explain it to them in a way to where they can understand it.
We're not trying to bring this, or at least I'm not trying to bring it to a spiritual concept, but it is.
Yes.
Because there's someone that made all of us, and I just don't think he made a mistake.
Yes.
I just don't think that he just showed up. This was a choice. Now, people say that, well, I'm born with two different genitals. We talked about that. That is something I feel that they couldn't help. That was birth. But the mind and the direction that they're going, I think that is something that could be dealt with or addressed. Am I correct in saying that? Because we do know that genetically these things do happen, because I've seen that myself. And you say?
I say, well, I mean, the good book says, in the beginning, God made man and woman in his image, male and female. He made them. And so, and everything he created was good. But there comes a time where man or woman has a mind of their own and start experimenting and want to change the divine law set in place, which cannot be changed. At the end of the day, he said, choose this day. You can choose life or you can choose death. And so with all of us, whether we're straight or in the alphabet, and please add the S for straight, because at the end of the day, we're all one race, and that's the human race. Okay? But at the end of the day, it's a choice.
It's a choice.
It's a choice.
And you know, I see that as we're speaking about this choice, I'm looking at how he physically made the man's mind to think and to be one way, and the woman's mind the other. But when you bring the two together, it makes a better or more complete job. It's because he done it. It's the way that he originally had the plan to operate. But I notice that when you take two things that are unnatural and you bring them together, sometimes you have a tendency to put too much of something in that makes that item or that individual flare in another direction. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I've got this male gender and this male gender, and they're pouring into the child. No female persuasion or of any sort is in there. So there has to be a certain way that child will develop because of what they're getting from home, from that root right there.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when you take something like that and you pour it into the child, will that become a problem with that child in our society later?
It's very possible. It could be. But on the flip side of that, depending on how that child continues to be nurtured and raised and their environment, God has a way of bringing things full circle. You know, I would venture to say there's some kids that have been raised in same-gender loving homes that turned out okay.
Right.
You know, so I can't say that because they're being raised in that type of environment that they're going to come out the same way. I don't know. But I just know, even with me being a female, when I'm in circles nowadays, I think it's important to have masculine and feminine energy.
Right,
When it's
right.
too much feminine energy,
Right,
we can
right.
be a hot mess. You
Right,
know, so
yeah.
I welcome the masculine energy. Growing up, because of my father being absent, I didn't realize the importance of the man until I began to read the Bible, and God talked about how important it was for the man to do the praying,
Right,
for
right.
the man to go to war.
Right.
We need our men.
And the Bible also says, train up a child when they're young so that when they grow old, they won't go apart and grow apart. And so that's from that training. And that shows me that. And then, you know, we have our biblical understanding when we read the Bible of how things started. But I never seen in there two men in the start of our life. I've always seen that there was a female and there was a male. And then when I look at the reproduction of male and female of any sort, there's those two that came together to produce that child. And so that's so great to me to see that how man has taken this and has laws behind it. Congress has laws behind this to back them up. And that's the extraordinary thing, that they've taken something like this and now they've put the right behind it, even though it's the wrong way that it came out or started, if you understand what I'm saying.
I do. And at the end of the day, this is what I'll say, because I am a woman of faith. God will have the last say so. He said he'll have mercy and compassion on whom he will. So I will just leave it up to God.
And he'll separate the wheat from the tare.
Exactly.
I hope that you've got a lot out of this today. We're coming to a close. I'm J.K. Allen, host of Oracles of God here on The Chocolate Box. And I want to say before we close today that on the chocolate box, I'm not going to never forget that we have our chocolate, delicious. And we normally would cut this up, but I'm not going to cut it today and eat any of this in front of you because you might want some. And would you like some chocolate?
No, thank you. Not today.
Okay, because some people cannot just eat chocolate. Like me, I can go into this and have a tons of fun, a ton. But anyway, I'm John K. Allen. I'm here guest hosting The Chocolate Box. You can find us also, The Chocolate Box, on YouTube. Go to your YouTube and you'll see The Chocolate Box, and you will see exactly what this show is all about. And once again, we're just so delightful that you spent your time with us. Have a great afternoon, a good day. God bless you, and we'll be talking to you next week. Take care.